All right, welcome everybody. This is Darcy Hitchcock with the Sustainability Alliance. I'm really excited to have you here today. We're going to be looking at the new Food Policy Council, or the new food policy created by the Verde Valley Food Policy Council. This is one of a series of quarterly webinars that we hold for our community. And the next one is going to be on river-friendly living on October 21st. If you're not already on our newsletter, please be sure to sign up so you'll know about future ones. I'll put in the chat our website address so that you can go there. The speakers today have asked that if you could keep your video on, it'd be lovely to see you. And in gallery view, it makes it more feel like a room full of people instead of just one face at a time. So I encourage you to do that. And I'm going to turn it over to Harvey now, who will introduce the session, and we'll have opportunities for interaction as we go through.
Well, welcome. On behalf of the Verde Valley Food Policy Council, we're hoping today to have a very exciting interchange, a conversation in our community so that we can explore the food system and recognize perhaps more clearly how our choices affect our food system. And so we'll have Darcy and Patrice working the presentation, and we'll be dealing with the food plan that we've developed through the council. So please put the food plan on, Patrice. We're in a situation of dealing with a challenging problem of improving our food system. We're not alone. Across the nation and in Canada, there are roughly 500 food policy councils that are formed on different levels: local level, regional level, county level, state level, because many people are concerned about our food system, that it's not necessarily working as well as it could in serving the needs of the prosperity of farmers and ranchers, serving the environment, and being able to promote community health. So we use this diagram as a way of identifying 5 vital sectors of the food system. So first, the green area is food production. And that's where farming and ranching come in. Then the second, blue, is processing, something we often don't consider, but the foods that are grown may need to be processed in particular ways. And that is one of the areas of economic prosperity that can certainly be promoted. The purple is the distribution of food. And that involves food moving over long distances. Then there's access to food. Where do we go to get the food? What are the issues there? And then the last section is food waste and recovery. We waste roughly 40% of our food on a national level. And yet we have growing numbers of people who are food insecure. So that's a very vital area that is really coming into its own. And if you would look down below the diagram, we have a vision for the council. All residents and visitors to Yavapai County enjoy widespread access to nutritious and affordable food through regional agricultural growers, food processors, distributors, and food waste recovery services that contribute to economic prosperity, a sustainable natural environment, and community health. And our mission is essentially to move our food system through community effort to improve its ability to increase our economic prosperity, improve our environment, and definitely improve community health. And if you switch to page 2, we have 3 major goal areas, which is getting food. And how do we get food in our area? You may have questions about that. Growing and processing food. What are the major activities taking place, and what are the major needs that have not yet been addressed? And the third area, learning about food. Support a variety of educational programs and what can be done and what is already taking place through different organizations, and particularly our county health agency. So we'll be looking at these 3 areas. With Darcy's help, we'll have a poll that will help you focus your thoughts and your questions, and we will be able to address them. So we would like for you now to, Darcy, if you would, do the chat survey number 1.
I will. Patrice, I think I need you to stop sharing your screen for a second. Great, thanks. I'm not sure if it works. All righty, I'm going to launch the poll. I'll give you a minute to answer. We're trying to figure out, what do you most want to learn about? And if what you want to learn about getting food isn't on this list, you can also type your question into the chat. Give you another 10, 20 seconds. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Hopefully you all had a chance and share the results. All righty. So it looks like people are most interested in how to develop a stronger food system and what are the key parts of a food system that we can help improve. Got that? All right. Who's next up?
That'll be me.
Okay.
And so do you have results to show?
Oh, you didn't see them. I thought that's odd.
Yeah, I did.
Share results.
Okay.
So, do you see them on your screen?
Yes.
Okay. So mostly the obstacles and threats, the dependence on imported food, stronger food system, and the key parts that we can help improve.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
And so if you would switch back to Patrice. So we'll begin to explore your questions and even your ideas about getting food. And so I'll make a few introductory remarks. The getting of food relies upon, for the most part, food that is transported from elsewhere in the world here to our Verde Valley. And we don't have exact numbers, but the percentage is probably 98% of imported food. And our local food is often not available locally. And that is a weakness that we see. our farmers and ranchers have steadily been losing money on an annual basis since 2002. And at 2002, they made a profit of $2,000 on the average. And on the last report of the agricultural census in 2017, they lost $10,000 per year on the average. So our farmers definitely need assistance in being able to make sales locally as well as at a distance. And we've had some barriers involved. Our county health department developed a procedure where a local farmer could then present food that had been raised according to certain food safety standards. And then when they're selling it to a restaurant, the restaurant then reviews that, the way the food was raised, and considers it as healthy, meeting the food safety standards. And so that approach actually has been implemented in very few places. So it's an area that we see as a major need of boosting the economic prosperity of our local farmers and ranchers. We notice that we're dealing with the process of the condition of food insecurity. And the US Department of Agriculture defines it as not having adequate amounts of nutritious food on a consistent basis. So a family with children may have a certain level of food, but it may, because they have a low income, the food may be essentially junk food without nutritional value. So how do we get food to families in that condition? The current level of food insecurity has been described by the federal government as a person or family making $24,000 a year income. Well, consider that. I mean, how would we deal with that level of income? Being able to meet needs of residents and paying all the bills, and still being able to have a diet that supports our health and the health of our children. So within the Verde Valley, in studies that we've done, we estimate that we now have about 25,000 persons in that qualify at $24,000 a year income. So consider that, 25,000 persons. And this is about 1/3 of our population in the Verde Valley. So we have a series of food banks. So we have a charitable distribution of food in addition to the commercial distribution. And so there are a number of questions dealing with that, because during the COVID pandemic, the numbers of clients, of people who lost jobs, doubled and tripled in some instances. And our local facilities lack money to expand their capacity. So we have storage problems. So giving you just this little bit of information, I would like to see if you have a particular question or comment you would like to make. We'd like to have an exchange. Who would like to comment? Anybody?
Well, I'd like to just mention that beyond the working poor and the people that we generally think of as food insecure, all of us are really food insecure in the face of a lot of environmental challenges and and social and economic challenges. So even if, we have in our community 4 supermarkets and they're stocked full, we're just 1 or 2 crises away from being in a food desert. So we can't be complacent just because right now we're experiencing abundance. We have to plan, since we're dependent upon imported food. What if there's not able to get the imported food to the market? So that's a transportation issue. So there's a lot of other issues that impact food availability besides income.
Thank you, Richard. Any comments? We have about another 10 minutes to share about this factor. So to help you, could you go up higher on the page, Patrice, page 5. Let's go to the first, the 1.1 goal. How about, yeah, there we are. So we have a number of goals within each of the 3 goal areas. So thank you. So one is increase the number of food insecure residents receiving nutritional food and beverages from both charitable and government food assistance programs, and encourage vital jobs, income, community programs that promote and support growing food on any scale. So we're not just looking at a remedial approach. Here's the hungry person, here's the box of food that that person can get each month. So we're looking at what causes the problem. And so we have generally the lack of income. And in some cases, the lack of transportation to be able to get food. There are multiple causes, but essentially the income factor is essential. The people with a low income have a very different shopping experience than most of us. And so if you're in the grocery store, it's of value to take a look at sometimes and just see what's in the cart of the person next to you. And we're now experiencing a period of inflation of food prices. And if you haven't noticed that, I think you haven't been going to the grocery store lately. The price of food is definitely up. And one way of dealing with that is having our own food garden. So Richard has a beautiful food garden, and Patrice is managing our food garden so that we are able to enjoy the real taste of a real tomato, as opposed to what we would find at the store. So there are many things we can do locally. And in our no, go ahead, Darcy.
Oh, sorry, Harvey. I had some questions. I didn't mean to interrupt your stream of consciousness, but 2 things. One, I really like that you're emphasizing the root cause. If we didn't have poverty, mostly we wouldn't have a lot of food insecurity. And one of the things that they're doing in Durango, Local First is doing locally in Durango, is they're certifying businesses that pay a living wage. And I thought that's kind of intriguing. It's an intriguing way of sort of flagging for people. If you go to this restaurant as opposed to that restaurant or whatever, the people there are making enough money to make ends meet. I'm really curious more about the mobile markets that you were talking about down below. A lot of times in the food policy, it talks about encourage this or whatever. So where does the money come from? How does this happen? How do we make it cool as opposed to something that feels like a handout?
Yes, for decades, our charitable food comes into the state through our Department of Economic Security. They subcontract to the Arizona Food Bank Network. And the network has 5 or now possibly 6 large warehouse of food banks. And of those, they distribute food to the rural counties. And our area has always been served by St. Mary's Food Bank in Phoenix. So our charitable food, like our commercial food, comes from Phoenix. That's the point where it is distributed. And so a few years ago, we were dealing with 13, 14 food banks and food pantries, and a couple of suppers, community supper type events where the homeless and other people could go to get food on a regular basis. In Prescott, they have hot meals available every night of the week. In the Verde Valley, we have them available only on 2 days a week. So we have a definite gap, particularly for the homeless. And we were able then, in working with St. Mary's, to convert the mission of Manzanita Outreach in Cottonwood. And Mike Newsom and his wife were able to use their skills, and that has become a mobile delivery program for St. Mary's. And so they will make food available, what they call food sharing, which is a friendlier way to offer food. They've made it available to many remote locations, covering some of the small communities in the Verde Valley that don't have a grocery store. So they've been able to make that expand. And with COVID, additional food needed to come into Arizona. And it did, but it caused severe problems in our local food banks because they didn't have enough storage space and not enough cold storage. So they really had to struggle. And the mobile delivery now has reached the stage with the new administration in Washington opening the doors to feed the hungry, where the previous administration was wanting to close the doors. So we're in a situation now of a much more hopeful situation with charitable food that comes from the government and major charities such as Feeding America. The Manzanita Outreach and St. Mary's initiated a new program about 3 weeks ago, which is direct delivery to the home. And they utilized a commercial business, DoorDash, to take the food from Manzanita and drive it to individuals that were on the list of needing food, but could not travel. And so they cover a radius of 15 miles from Cottonwood. So that's been a very recent experiment, and we'll be hearing later on how well it's done and how that might impact the future service delivery. We have a concern about our children because when you look at the school lunch program, the school lunch program has certain financial requirements of the parents. So not all kids have been served, but due to the pandemic, that the USDA has loosened regulations and now is saying that all children at school will receive school lunch and school breakfast. So that's a very bright spot that we're looking forward to. But when you look at the percentage of students in our local schools that have qualified for free reduced meals, the percentages are very high, and they average 61% of our students have qualified that level. So we're looking at roughly 1 out of 2 children that is likely food insecure now, a year after the pandemic began. So there are other aspects of the charitable food system that we can go into. The SNAP program, what people know as food stamps, became SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP. And recently, the USDA has allotted more funds. Not a lot of funds, but you may be looking at a family receiving $50 more a month as they qualify for SNAP. And one of our challenges in the Verde Valley is seniors. The older folks who find it too difficult because they're not computer savvy to sign up online to receive SNAP benefits. So that's another area, along with children in particular, that is really needs a lot of additional help.
Harvey, I have another comment on that. As you mentioned, the SNAP program and so forth, the issue of food justice has been discussed on our committee, and food justice really comes down to not only access, but also quality. So often higher income people are able to afford food that's more nutritious, fresher, and so forth. So some of the efforts that have been made is that people can use their SNAP allocations in farmers markets or WIC. So there's an opening up of availability for lower income people that are dependent on charity to get access to fresher food. But it really, the food justice thing is a big issue, because if you want the most food for your dollars, you're going to go to a big box store like Walmart. And sometimes you could get good food, but a lot of times you're going to get junk food. So, this is a big issue in the community of people who are dependent on charity, is how do you use the food and make it nutritious and access it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Richard. We've reached the end of our timing for this part of our discussion. So Darcy, if you would like to admit the second poll.
Chris, I saw your hand up, but you can ask in the next session or make your comment there, okay?
So this next one is about growing food. What do you want to learn most about? And you might have to scroll down to see all the options. It got a little long. Check as many as you want. Okay, give you another few seconds. It looks like it's, oh no, still a couple more things coming in. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results. So can you guys see the results, Richard and Harvey, I hope? Okay, good. Thank you, Bonnie, for your, I couldn't miss it. That's great. So lots of interest in how do the agricultural practices need to adapt and expand access to affordable fresh food and foster new opportunities for local farmers. Those had the highest. And so Chris, I'm going to give you a second to grab your mic and ask the questions you wanted to ask before.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I can't show my video. It's because of the setup I have here at work. But I did just want to make a comment more than a question. I have been working a little bit with Kathleen at the Sedona Community Food Bank, and we'll be providing a class to the clients there in October. And because one of the problems she has, or she expressed that would be helpful to resolve, is the disconnect with the food bank. You know, yes, they receive a lot of low quality type donations for sure, but they also receive a lot of really high quality items, but they are odd or strange to folks because they don't know how to cook, how to use higher quality food, such as, something that just doesn't require adding water to a box and that kind of thing. So that's where I'm coming in. And I think a little bit more of what we need is a lot of people just don't have how to recognize quality foods, how to make good food choices, how to just add quality to something that is pre-made to make it more nutritious. And so just getting that education, it's going to be a free kind of lunch and learn class for people. How do you use your food box, and how do you start using some of the quality items that are donated and the fresh fruits and vegetables? How can you easily incorporate those? So that's just my comment.
That's great. And learning about food is the third section of this. So that's a great heads up for something that's going on right now. Peter, I see you have your hand up. Grab your mic.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Peter Friederisi, and I'm director of the Sustainable Communities Program at NAU. So I'm in Flagstaff and not in the Verde Valley. But Chris, I was excited to hear your comment. We're actually just launching a collaboration with St. Mary's Food Bank, or the Northern Arizona part of St. Mary's out of their Flagstaff office, to address exactly this problem, because that's what the food bank folks have been telling us too, that they are delivering boxes of eggplants or spaghetti squash or whatever is seasonally available to remote communities where people might have no familiarity with that food. And so we're going to have a graduate student and undergraduate student group working on this throughout this new academic year. And the strategy that we're exploring is kind of twofold. One is we're going to be partnering with a software developer called Plant Jammer, which is actually out of Denmark. But they have a sort of a handy web application where you can plug in whatever ingredients you have in your fridge or in the food box, and it'll spit out some recipes for you. And that's really useful for all of us, I think. It's not necessarily real useful in for a lot of food bank clients who either don't have the internet access or don't live in places where they can get the sort of supplementary ingredients like soy sauce or some of the fundamental stuff that we might be used to cooking with, but isn't available in remote communities. So we're going to be practicing this partnership this year to look for strategies to get more information to the people who are getting the food. And we're also partnering with a nutrition professor on our campus, and with an upper level nutrition class that he has, which is a kitchen class. So they're actually experimenting with recipes in their class. And so we hope to work with them and kind of give them the list, like, this is what's going to be coming from the food bank in October. Come up with some recipes that are easy to do with limited ingredients, and that are also sort of culturally or regionally appropriate, because we know people in Arizona like to eat differently than people in Denmark, certainly, but even people in the Midwest or anywhere else where recipes might be coming from. So
That's great, Peter. Thanks so
yeah.
much for that information. Richard, to keep us on track, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Well, what Peter and Chris have brought up is really the end game of food production. In other words, what do you do with the harvest? And the most checked question on our questionnaire was, how can we foster new opportunities for Arizona farmers, ranchers, and food crafters? So that was the area of most interest amongst this group. And I know that some of you have experience with what do you do with the harvest. I know Patty, working as the chef at Orm School, saw that really you have to introduce new foods to people for them to experience them. And a lot of times people don't like to eat outside of their comfort zone. So what we've seen in the Verde Valley is that to kind of rewind a little bit to the opportunity for the growers, is a crucial thing is distribution, because you're not going to put in all the effort and expense of growing something if there's not a market, if you can't get it to market. And we've explored food hubs and different ways of distributing food, but one of the most exciting developments is through Local First and the Good Food Finder. They've developed a Verde grown label, so that we actually are having a brand now for local grown food. So tourists and locals will be able to see what foods are actually produced in the Verde Valley. And this is a growing thing. So, the whole food system being dependent upon imports is very, very fragile. It's at the mercy of so many factors. When we see that the drought in California is going to impact our food supply in Arizona, the fact of the lowering of Lake Mead and the cutting back of water to Arizona farms is going to impact our food availability. The Verde River is not having as much available water. So there's all of these different things. So when we talk about opportunity, we also have to put, it's hard for me to separate all of these things because they're so interdependent, especially in the food system. And when you look at climate, when you look at water availability, and all of these things. I know we have a lot of gardeners sitting here in our group. Did any of you have your home gardens destroyed by hail this summer? Were you struggling with drought all through the last years? So we have all of these factors. And another factor that hinders opportunity is an aging farming population. The average age of farmers in Arizona is 60 years old. And there isn't a pipeline for new farmers coming into the system. So we've got a lot of these critical issues. How do we get, if we increase the opportunities, maybe we'll increase the incentive for younger farmers to get involved. But at present, there are only about 2%, I believe, of there's 2,400 farmers that are considered young, where we have 32,000 farmers that average age is 60 years old. So, and
Richard, this might be a good time to answer Joseph's question. He was curious if we've developed or have access to a local farmer rancher contact list for the Verde Valley. Is there such a thing?
There is, Harvey, you want to talk about that? You have a list of all the local farmers.
Yeah, we've been working to develop a list, and for those of you who don't know the difficulties involved, the USDA long ago has established a confidentiality agreement with farmers and ranchers, food producers. So they do not want to be exposed to the public and have their economic factors out in the open. So USDA makes locating farmers difficult. They don't assist. And so that carries on down through the line, even with our Department of Agriculture. So we've been compiling a list and working in tandem with Steve Ayers over in the town of Camp Verde, who is promoting the Verde Grown label. So we do have a list available, and just connect with us. And I think our information, Patrice, is already listed for contact in the chat. So feel free to connect with us. We will be making this information available as people need it. And it has long been missing, and we're really happy we're dealing with at least 55 farms and ranchers in the Verde Valley. And we suspect that the number is closer to 75, 85, somewhere in that region. So we're making headway.
Joseph, it looks like you've got your hand up. Do you want to make a comment or question?
Yeah, thank you guys. I can only stay for just a bit longer, and I'm so glad to have run into this meeting. It came to me through Cal Manis down here in Cochise County, who I worked with on the NSF RAIN grant, and the RIC, which is a council that was doing some countywide STEM outreach and education. Anyhow, I'm actually a Rough Rider from Yavapai College a long time ago in the 1980s, and lived in Camp Verde and that area, but I live now in Cochise County. I just brought up the local farmer rancher list. It's part of the work that I do here in Cochise County in connection with farm to school and just community development. And because we're in a really rural county, and I've lived here now for 20 years or so, I did not bother with the USDA or any federal agencies. I just met farmers out at their farms and ranches at farmers markets and developed this list that we have. And then I just loop them into all communication that may be helpful or relevant to them. Like if I was had known about this meeting, I would have probably sent it to a few of them to, have them check it out and hear about what's happening in the Verde Valley. And so it's very informal, but very useful. Just as an example, the farmer rancher list helped us develop and launch a local pop-up farmers market at a hospital here in Benson, the Benson Hospital. Runs on Fridays. It's very small. It's one farmer, maybe 80 to 200 pounds of produce and fruits once a week, but it's really made an interesting impact on the community, being connecting the hospital to locally grown food and giving that farmer a chance to have a place to sell that is easy for him to access. And it was just a kind of an accidental outcome of that list. So that's why I mentioned it. And your guys' conversation is very inspiring. I'm just so glad to hear what's going on, and I hope I can pop in the future to hear about what you're doing and feel this inspiration. It's really incredible. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and we'll definitely give you notice of what we're offering. I want to make a note that we're turning our website into a clearinghouse of information. So it'll have events that are coming up, classes that apply to different groups of people regarding the food system. And we'll have a listing of books, a library that will often be very helpful to track down information. And we have a number of studies that have also been done by one of our council members, Dr. Isaac Mapenga, who his studies are very, very relevant, not only to the Verde Valley and Coconino County, but also would be of help down in Cochise County as well.
So in the chat is a link to the Food Policy Council webpage. And as Harvey mentioned, it's full of resources, but you can also download the food policy itself. And we really want to encourage you. Under the area of growing and processing food, we have 12 different goals. They go all the way from the way food is grown to larger environmental issues, because you have, the challenge of food is, as we see it in food security, is transportation, freshness, packaging, and waste. So as we can reduce some of these factors like transportation and packaging, we can also impact the environment. And then the way that food is grown, it's beyond organic now. A lot of people are talking about agroecology, and it seems to be moving more to the top of people's awareness on how food production impacts the environment, the habitat, the water, and the toxins that have been used in industrial agriculture impact our health and the health of the environment. So it's really important, if you have the time, to look at the goal area under growing and processing food, because there are 12 different areas that each have an action plan. Some of the action plans have to do with water, some have to do with ecosystems, and so forth. So the way food is produced and how we obtain it is very critical. And we've seen in the Verde Valley that actually the lead has been taken by what we might not consider food, being wine and craft beer. So we have, a new barley production taking off in the Verde Valley because it uses less water, but also there's now a market for it. So, this is how the opportunity, the word opportunity and food crafting that was in that question figure in the picture. Why suddenly in the last few years are some people who are reusing their land to grow barley? And it also goes with economic development. So when you look at the diagram at the beginning of the food policy, each of those sectors are separate and the connection looks linear, but it's not linear. It's more like a Russian doll where you have nested, they're all nested together. And so when we look at the food system, we have to look at this nested system from environment to the client, that this whole system is interconnected. And waste isn't just food waste, it's the waste of packaging and so forth. So it's a really big issue. And I would like to know if anyone has some observations about that or input. One of the things I'll continue then.
Wait, Richard.
Oh.
Emerson Jones has
Emerson.
his hand up. You have to
Casey.
watch that.
Hi. My primary interest in relation to all of the issues that you're talking about has to do with education. A little bit of background, I was the head grower at Heinz Horticulture in Chino Valley, and then became one of the owners at Verde River Growers in Cottonwood, and then returned to my teaching career at Orm School and worked with Patty Mars as the director of sustainability. And what we saw there was incorporating students in the garden, and Patty worked with them in the kitchen. They were able to see the full cycle, from planting the seed to the harvest, to cooking it, and the pride in serving it. And to me, that is a solution on so many different levels. And I think there are a lot of opportunities to provide that kind of experience for homeowners and people who are food insecure. So I'm working with a group at Arcasani now who are trying to establish an agriculture program there. But to me, educational fairs, Patty and I put on a sustainability fair for the students at Orm School, and they were able to experience animal husbandry and classes on raising chickens and raised beds and water harvesting. So that's my primary interest, and would be interested in any discussions around those topics.
Yeah, by the way, Casey Jones, good to see you again.
Well, you know, you bring up a great point, Casey, that it's really the involvement of us in our food. We've been, at the very beginning, Harvey said, we're not just passive consumers. We need to be involved with our food. Growing it, of course, is the first step of involvement, but there's other levels of involvement that we can experience. And I mean, the preparation of food is being involved. And I think, you know, the slow food movement has shown us that when we take time, we start to connect with the food that we're eating, even if we didn't grow it. If we went to a farmer's market or bought it, it's still in the making of the food that it's our first primary interaction and relationship with our food is eating it. And so, you know, this is a really important thing. And so when we talk about, again, opportunities, what is going to create the next generation of food producers? And it is this allowing these areas of involvement. We'll get into that even farther in the next section about learning about food, but it is central to the growing and production and processing of food, because all of that impacts how we eat.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard. Our time says we need to move along to Darcy. The next poll.
Coming right up. Let's see, learning about food. What do you most want to learn about learning about food? You might have to scroll down to see all the questions. Okay, I'll give you another second or two. All right. Oh. All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. And it looks like the The last two questions, how can opportunities to gain knowledge and skills about choosing, growing, et cetera, can be expanded and diversified? And what strategies for food waste reduction and recovery can be included in education? Those got the biggest votes. And if you have any other questions that weren't on our list, please type them in the chat so we can respond to them.
So I think what these two most popular questions entail is the consumer level. We know we need to develop workforce, and there is a workforce in, an agricultural workforce development in education, but we really want to educate the consumer, I think, because we've learned that how we spend our money is ultimately the biggest force for change. And so we want an educated consumers. And I don't know if you'd mind, Patty, that I put you on the spot, but you've been engaged with slow food, you've been engaged with teaching children, you've worked from farm to fork programs, and you're really, for me, an expert in this area. So Patty, welcome. I wish I could see you. I know you're in Ajo, but welcome. I was so happy to see your name on the list.
Oh, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Well, what I can add to this conversation at this point is having lived here in Ajo, boy, has my perspective changed on living in a food desert. And also, I could even go on to say living in civilization, where there are programs in place and so many different ways to feed people and to get the food to the people that need it. And I agree wholly with Casey, and great to talk with you, Casey, about the educational aspect. There was nothing more rewarding for me personally, and no better way to see results than to have youth involved in every aspect of the food system. And that's truly where the education lies, and the slow food values are just a no-brainer, and they also follow through to the rest of the way you live your life. And if you just redirect them, those same values to being kind to people, seeing where the needs are, and sharing is just the concept there. I don't know if that answers anything, Richard, but there you go.
It's wonderful just to hear your voice and experience. Chris, I was fascinated with the program that you're getting involved with. There's this barrier between the essential ingredients and the finished product. If I have a bag of dry lentils, that's a really nutritious potential, but so many people don't know what to do with it. If you get it in your food box, let's say you're at a food bank, or even if you're just shopping and you see these, a bag of dry lentils, how do you, the time and the skill to turn that into a meal that your children and whole family will enjoy is a huge step for a lot of people to take. So we're looking at a culture that has been removed from the old skills of cooking from scratch, cooking from what's on the farm? How do we bridge that gap? And it really impacts how we shop and how we and what foods we access for our diet and our health. Do you have any comments, Chris, on that?
Sure. One of the first classes I will be doing, and hopefully they'll continue with the food bank, is starting out with maybe more of what they do know. And so my first class I love to show people is taking 2 cans maybe of black beans that you might get or opt to choose, 2 cans of any type of beans, and adding just a jar of salsa to it. And then how else can you add more nutritional and taste to it? And we go through just maybe a bag of frozen vegetables or a can of vegetables. How do you build nutrients and flavor in a dish with maybe items they do know? And then as they get comfortable with coming to the classes is, taking a next step of doing something like, how do you prepare something from dried, like lentils? They can be super quick and easy, but are you aware of that? And you demonstrate it for them. And you open up discussion to maybe people's memories of things of grandma cooking this way, and just really trying to, every audience is different, every class is different, but starting out more with what they do know or what might be in a typical box, and building on what they can add both nutrient value to it, and then also trying to excite them into exploring things that they aren't familiar with and using that, and providing recipes, just simple recipes at the classes. And I think someone mentioned in the chat box, through just my hope is to provide, to the food bank, just some simple, beans and greens type of recipes that are just maybe 4 or 5 ingredients. So it's not overwhelming and doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of fancy equipment either.
Right. I love those ideas. And Peggy had put in the chat, the neighborhood kitchens might help following the model of tamale parties, which raises a question I have about cultural appropriateness. A lot of the stuff that you probably get, or some of it anyway, at the food pantries is probably very sort of, I don't know what to call it anymore, but maybe Anglo foods. And so where does food sovereignty come in for the Yavapai Apache Nation, and cultural differences amongst the populations that we have? How can we diversify what we have to help those people see foods that they recognize?
So
Can I jump in here for a second? This is Patty. I was just thinking of the same concept, because if we look to our indigenous communities and our immigrants, those are folks that are used to cooking from scratch. They know how to do this. And if we can incorporate their knowledge into the programs that are available, and the just in the spotlight somehow, their information is so valuable, because this is the way that many of these people do eat.
Well, Patty, as with all of us, their diet has been colonized, and food sovereignty is now emerging as a very strong movement. And actually in Arizona, most of the farmers are tribal or indigenous farmers, the greatest percentage. And so this is really, really important, because the health issues that our indigenous neighbors have experienced are in large part due to the fact that they have been removed from their traditional foods. And diabetes, obesity, heart disease, all of those factors. And they're seeing food sovereignty as not only a cultural issue, but also a health issue. And so this is super important. And if you take it to the next level of environmental health, the indigenous seeds that have been saved through such organizations as Native Seed Search and some of the seed banks and so forth, they're also the seeds that are most vital in terms of nutrition and adaptability to climate change and climate challenges. So what you're saying, Patty, is just the very tip of a big system of food sovereignty. And Darcy, we all need food sovereignty. And I was in a discussion room with Pinnacle Prevention on food sovereignty forum that they have. And some of the participants said, well, our food has been colonized, but our strength is how we use what came from other cultures. And they used an example that our food system is multicultural. And most of us eat Hispanic foods, Asian foods in our normal diet. And by saying that indigenous people don't is really marginalizing their food choices also in a way. So for example, there's Ramona Farms, which is on the Gila Reservation. They're growing wheat and tepary beans as their main products. Well, wheat is not an indigenous food, but it's how they've adapted. They now call it Pima wheat, Pima red wheat. And so they have, and the Sonora white wheat. So these things are imports from another continent that is now being embraced and utilized by indigenous people. So it's really, education, I think, will lead to knowledgeable diversification. And that leads to health, because any healthy system is diverse, whether it's an ecosystem or a food system. So,
and I would like to mention that our role as a council is to support the existing programs that are already offering nutritional education. And so if you're not aware of them, we can help you make connections if you're interested. And I would like to add the comment that we have a major resource with our University of Arizona Cooperative Extension Program. And those of you who have not yet met Dr. Isaac Mapenga have a treat ahead of you. And I just encourage you to make connections with him. He has just obtained a large grant from USDA to convert the waste of wine growing, what they call pomage, into fertilizer and nutrient for the fields. So I just encourage you to make connections with Isaac.
and Harvey, that really relates to the last question that people checked, which is what strategies for food waste reduction and recovery can be included in nutrition, culinary, and garden agricultural education. So I think that the consciousness that develops through the learning about food production is that it is a complete closed loop, that it goes from seed back to soil, from soil to soil. And I think that if we realize that the closed loop of our food, then we will also be able to transfer that idea to other areas of our life, in how it's impacting the climate, how it's impacting overall waste. And so I think, all of these are, as I said, we're connected. Well, if we start cooking from scratch, we're reducing packaging. If we go to a farmer's market, we're reducing packaging and transportation. So all of these things are interconnected. And I think that the important point of education is, whether it's nutrition education, culinary education, gardening education, that we look at system thinking. And system thinking is so natural in a garden, because a garden is a system that we can realistically connect with. And then we need to apply that systems thinking to our whole life and other areas. So, it's the opportunity that is on the threshold is very, very exciting. And I think all of us need to think about, how do we get from where we are, from here to there? And so I think the whole food policy is really about connecting the dots in a system that is self-sustaining, healthy, and gives us some joy in life as well.
And I would like to add an element we haven't touched on, which is sort of like the elephant in the room. And that is what's happened to our food systems throughout America and Canada, as well as Europe. When the US formed, virtually everybody was a farmer. Everybody had gardens. They were caring for themselves. Food was very integrated into the lives. After World War II, the food system became more industrialized. Trains would ship food long distances. Refrigeration allowed food to be preserved while it was shipped. And we today have an international food system that means that when you go to the grocery store, the strawberries may come from Chile or from the Netherlands. And you'll have difficulty finding out where they did come from. And we have a food system that is based around roughly 20 international corporations, the largest one of which is Walmart. And Walmart has a very checkered past in terms of how it deals with its distributors, and has very destructive methods of obtaining the food that they then sell in their stores at a lower price. But you also have hundreds of subsidiary corporations to those 20 that are dealing with processed food. And we've gotten more and more of our food has turned into processed because it can be manipulated for sale, showing one advantage or another. And one of the very challenging programs that the major food companies have been following now for about 20, 25 years is that they conduct brainwave testing on persons, changing the flavor, the texture, the quality of a food in ways that are not nutritional, but are designed to achieve a high, an ecstatic state that they compare to the ecstatic state of a person on cocaine. This is an established part of the major food corporations. And what bothers me the most is that they're applying this addictive technology to children. So they do that largely through breakfast foods and other food snacks for kids, and creating a type of addiction for certain types of taste. And so we, on a local level, overall have lost power over our food system over those decades. And so organizations like the Council and many of you in your organizations are seeking to restore sensibility, control, and good health to our food. And so I will briefly show you, Patrice, if you can put me on the screen. I want to show you 3 books that I recommend that you may wish to find out about. And so the first one is called Salt, Sugar, Fat by Pulitzer Prize winning author Michael Moss. And this is where you learn about the addiction programs and the different strategies that our food is now being processed with. A recent book that gives you an overall picture of the food system is Building Community Food Webs by Ken Meter. And Ken has been a presenter at several of our statewide food conferences. And so this information will be made available to you in the chat or afterwards. We'll make sure you get it. What this book shows is that our food system is become the servant of the international food system, and it's extracting billions of dollars out of our communities. And so, like Local First Arizona, he really makes the case for developing our local food system, helping our farmers and ranchers be prosperous, and restoring that local, almost community family contact. And the third book is a positive book about the good food revolution. And it's talking about all the organizations that have been developing over the last several years that are promoting what we simply call good food.
Harvey, who's the author of that book?
That one is Will Allen, who's a very well-known person.
So Harvey, can I give another good book?
Sure.
And this one was mentioned in one of your books. It's called Food from the Radical Center, but the subtitle is really important. It's Healing Our Land and Communities. And this is by Gary Paul Naban, who is well known to many as an agroecologist, I guess you would call him. And it's a very hopeful book because it focuses on how we changing our food habits can build community. And that includes indigenous communities and so forth. And Gary, if you know Gary, and a lot of you do, he was very central in the slow food movement and in regional heritage foods. And so it's a really beautiful book from a very beautiful man. And it's a positive message on how communities are healed. And actually, Ken Meter refers to that book in his introduction as one of his inspirations.
Okay, I put all those books in the chat.
Okay.
Very good. And so we're now at the wrap-up part of our program. And thank you all for pitching in. We're making our Food Council website as a clearinghouse, as a resource. And we would appreciate your ideas and suggestions. We'll be willing to build the library to have food system events involved on our calendar of events. And we hope to become more of a clearinghouse, a center point for information. And we're probably going to use the next month primarily to build the website. And you're welcome to go to it. And Patrice has already put on chat the contact information, which leads you first to our website for cornucopia. And then it's an easy step to find the webpage for the Food Council. So we're in the process of creating a living document in our plan, our action plan, and our policy suggestions. We're very supportive of existing programs, and we see the need for further collaboration, for people coming together and actually talking through issues and being able to come up with positive solutions. And so as we engage with you today, we ask you to consider if you have an interest in the Food Council. We are open for new members to participate. We have once a month meetings on Zoom, and usually on the third Wednesday, but depending on who is on the council, we can change the meeting date. But we'd like to engage in an ongoing, not just a conversation, but an actual action plan that mobilizes community resources. And through the resources you're involved with, do you have areas of frustration in your plans? Are there areas where you need additional support? And so we're very much in a position of being able to offer support to other organizations. We're a community, so we all hopefully are learning how to work together to achieve greater results. And we see the food system today as largely under attack. National figures show that what is it, Richard? 3 acres of farmland are now being lost every minute. So farmland now is subject to what I call the equity acquisition phase, where because of the pandemic, many businesses, including farmers and ranchers, are placed in a very risky financial situation. And so you have major investment firms going around buying up as much farmland as possible. In the restaurant industry, you have them buying up restaurants. And there are major consequences. And perhaps you've heard that Bill Gates now owns more farmland than any other person. So there's a process of pulling away, of extracting the wealth out of our communities. And our food system is, in my mind, absolutely essential. We depend on having water, we depend on having air we can breathe. We also need to have nutritious food. And so in working with Yavapai County in their new comprehensive plan that sets policies for the next 10 years, we've submitted our vision and our recommendations to be part of that plan. But they have 8 major sessions of the plan, like dealing with land use, dealing with transportation, et cetera. And it does not include food. They have water, they have air, that doesn't include food. So we're running up against the challenge of how to work with our county to make sure that the needs of our food system are adequately represented. So I'm just summing up some of these items that need to be considered because they're an important part of the context in which we work to improve our food system. Richard?
Yeah, what I think is unique about the food policy is that it's responsive. In other words, things are always changing. Our immigration policy changes with one administration and it impacts the food system. Drought and water availability impact. So we have to be resilient. Just as a food system has to be resilient, the food policy has to be resilient. Culturally, there are lots of cultural changes. In the state of Arizona, organic food production increased 72% in the last 4 years. That is a response to consumer choices. So if farms now are switching, there are farms in Arizona that are going from the traditional industrial model to starting to do organic. And that's just the next step before you get to regenerative. So organic, most of us who have been locked into organic for a long time are saying, well, it's more important that gardening be a system, not just an organic lettuce. Like if you're in Yuma, you can have a whole industrial field of organic lettuce, but is that really restorative and regenerative farming? Is that impacting our environment in a positive way? So culturally, we are experiencing changes as well. And I think that our food policy shows that responsiveness to changing realities, to changing individual choices. There's a lot more people who heard of vegan 5 years ago. Well, now that's a big deal. So people, as their food choices change, agriculture is changing along with it. So a food policy needs to be responsive. It's a living, just like the garden and the food system, it's a living organism. And so that's why we're welcoming all of you to participate and give your input, because you, and I know Peter, you and your students and collaborators are doing the research, a lot of the research part of this. Well, if you find some things in your research that are missing from the food policy, we really would want to embrace that, because I think you'll discover, Peter, that this is a very fluid, the agriculture in the Verde Valley is a very fluid situation. Not just a water issue, but a cultural issue and a land use issue and so forth. I visited 350 acres on the Avapai Apache Nation a week ago, and they want to create organic farming there. There's a lot of challenges, but that's something new. And so there's all of these issues that are involved. And I think I really encourage all of you to look at and consider the food policy and the action plans, and see how it can be applied in the real world. That's our goal.
And I'd like to just add that one of the functions we serve is as an advocate for state agencies, state legislation, and federal legislation. And we're working, for example, with Pinnacle Prevention, have been over the last 3 or 4 years, to develop an Arizona food system plan.
Would you like me to share the webpage?
Yeah, would you?
Yeah, I can.
And we've been working with Local First, because that's an economic issue. So the food policy, it has economic stakeholders, it has health stakeholders, it has farming. We've worked with the Arizona Department of Agriculture. So all of these parties that are connected to the food system are stakeholders. And I think it's really unique that in the state of Arizona, there's not a comprehensive food policy as there are in many other states.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for example, New Mexico has just pulled together a statewide plan that's really very pertinent to our needs in Arizona. So we try to reach out to all the resources. And Johns Hopkins University has had a major resource for several years called the Center for a Livable Future. That is a wonderful resource. And I think if you hang out with us, I think we'll have a lot of fun and we'll be able to accomplish some real progress. So I think we're at the end of our time. And Patrice is just showing some of the items we have listed as part of our publications on the website. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you go there. So I think, Darcy, we're at a point where you might wish to close the curtain on our sharing today.
That I can do. I have control. So thank you all the Food Policy Council for all the great work that you've done. And I can't wait to see some of this get more implemented. I'm eager for that. And thank you, the rest of you, for all of your experience and knowledge and interest in this topic. I will be posting the recording later once I get it uploaded. So if you know of people who wanted to participate and couldn't, or if you needed to chase down a little bit of information, we'll make sure to have that available on the Sustainability Alliance AZ website. And then I'm sure Cornucopia will probably get the link up there too. Anyway, thanks for coming. You guys take care. Stay
Bye.
safe.
Mhm.
Thank you, Darcy.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Patrice.
Good to see everybody. Thank you.
Bye.